Today on Beyond 6 Seconds.
I believe a lot of people's identity is wrapped up in their job. It was part of me, despite the fact that I didn't like it. And my identity as a man, as a human being, was wrapped in that.
Welcome to Beyond 6 Seconds, the podcast that goes beyond the 6-second first impression to share the extraordinary stories and achievements of everyday people. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Femi Opaneye. Femi is the founder and CEO of Linked Optimization, which provides LinkedIn account management as a service to enable sales professionals and businesses to generate B2B leads on LinkedIn. By working with him, his clients are able to establish authority status, save time, and increase revenue by booking sales appointments with their top prospects. His background is in law, having graduated from law school in London in 2002. Femi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sure. So you've had a really interesting road towards becoming an entrepreneur, which started several years ago. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. My background is in law. However, after working in law for several years, I decided to go into investment banking. So I spent the last almost 10 years in investment banking up until 2014. And as I said, I've been an entrepreneur since 2014, so that makes about 4 years now as an entrepreneur. It has indeed been very interesting in the sense that I have tried many different business ideas over that time period, and all of them failed.
Oh, my.
And that brings us up until 2017 when I started this particular business, which is the LinkedIn lead generation as a service. And this is the first business for me really that has actually taken off. Because prior to that, I was treading water. I was trying to find my feet, and I'm glad to say that I've actually found it.
Oh, that's great. Take us back a couple years to when, you were still working in corporate and maybe your entrepreneurial dreams were still very early on in the process.
Yeah, sure. I would say that I was a dreadful employee, actually. And if I wouldn't have hired myself as an employee because I just didn't care really. And that was always the problem. And for many, many years, I went through this cycle of not caring about my work, about the business that I was involved in, which was in investment banking. I mean, I had to leave because I got sick of being this employee that wasn't a model employee, that wasn't really there to further the agenda of the business. And so that's why I really had to leave investment banking. But yeah, I mean, taking you back, I graduated from law school in 2002. I worked for several law firms here in London. And then I made the transition into investment banking around 2006. So the first investment bank that I worked for is a bank called Credit Suisse. Mm-hmm. And I worked there for a while. And actually, the idea was to move into investment banking proper, but I kind of fell into a role that sits in between legal and investment banking. So I was working in the legal field within investment banking all of this time.
Okay.
And the time that I really decided or took the decision to leave investment banking was when I lost my job in 2008, when I was working at Deutsche Bank. Mm-hmm. And I went through a really harrowing period that was 2009, actually, where I became extremely depressed and suicidal. Mm. And that's when I knew that I actually had to leave investment banking.
Wow. Those of us who remember 2008 and 2009, what a difficult time that was, particularly for anyone working in banking and financial services. It sounded like a lot of things really came to a head for you in terms of that crisis, being let go, and then just realizing that you really didn't enjoy investment banking after all, and that it was time for a different bit of a direction.
Well, that's right. I mean, the entire time that I was working in investment banking, the time I was working for Deutsche Bank, about 15 or 18 months until I was let go, I didn't enjoy my job at all. And I went into work every day wondering if I was going to get fired. So, I mean, I had that was always with me. And I just didn't really enjoy the role. I mean, I was only there. I was basically treading water, getting paid a salary, and just doing the bare minimum to get by. But the moment of realization for me was really that how could it get to the point that this job that I really hated led me to actually want to commit suicide? Because I really didn't enjoy investment banking. I really didn't enjoy the corporate world. Yet, the fact that I couldn't get another job within the corporate world, within investment banking around that period, because there were no jobs, it made me get to the point of hopelessness, actually, where I couldn't find a job. And that's when I had the moment of awakening and said, look, what do I authentically want to do with my life? Who am I authentically as a human being? And that was when I made the decision to, look, I need to leave investment banking because it's not for me. It's not what I want to do with my life. Having said that, it still took me another 5 years to pluck up the courage to actually leave because let's put it this way, the perks are very good.
Yes.
And so it took me a long time to actually deal with that. And then 5 years later, I did, in fact, quit my job. And I've been an entrepreneur ever since.
Wow. So even if we're let go or we leave a job, even if we hate it and we know it's not right for us, it still can cause quite a crisis of self-worth and questioning and wondering. It's funny, even the things we don't like, when we lose them, it suddenly it's still a crisis and it's still painful. And I know you mentioned you were extremely depressed and suicidal for several months after losing your job, and then came to this point of awakening and kind of continued your journey from there. But like, what kind of self-reflection did you do, and how did you get through that difficult time?
I mean, I would love to say that I went to some kind of therapy. I would love to say that, I spoke to people about this and this brought me out of it, but none of that happened. A lot of my identity, a lot of my fake identity, let me put it that way, was wrapped up. And I believe a lot of people's identity is wrapped up in their job.
Yeah.
What they do on a daily basis, because, I mean, everything we do is wrapped around us, going to bed, waking up in the morning, putting on our suit, traveling to work, getting to work, working for 8 to 10 hours, and then traveling back home, getting into bed, and repeating that process over and over again. So it was part of me, despite the fact that I didn't like it. And my identity as a man, as a human being, was wrapped in that. It was a huge ego boost to say, oh, I work in investment banking. All of my friends were working in finance, and they still do, by the way. And so those conversations, they just rolled off our tongues. Okay, this is what we do. We talked about bonuses. We talked about, the front office and the back office. And, oh, I work for Deutsche Bank. I work for Goldman Sachs. As I said, a lot of my identity was wrapped up in all of that. And so it was very difficult for me to deal with. And I would say that at my lowest points during the day, when I was trying to find a job, I became so exhausted with trying to find a job, with the entire process, that I decided, look, this is just hopeless. I'm going to just jump out the window, because there was a big window in my room, and that was the method, the means that I was going to use to commit suicide.
Wow.
And at those lowest points, I would be so exhausted that I'd crawl into bed and I'd fall asleep for an hour. And when I woke up, everything seemed just a bit better. And this feeling, this scenario played itself out for about 2 to 3 weeks until I decided I can't keep doing this. And so that is when I decided to get the next job, any job that comes along. And that's when I got a job in telesales. I was earning a fraction of what I earned in investment banking. So I think I was earning the equivalent of maybe $80 per week, selling home insulation. And I was dreadful at the job, but it made me feel a bit better. And that's how I managed to work myself out of that crisis.
Wow. And then I know after that, you eventually did go back to a corporate job. And I think you actually made a pretty major move at the time as well. Can you tell me a little bit about how that came about?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I had no idea what I wanted to do. This is 2009. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew that I had to leave investment banking. I had to leave the corporate field. And so late into, or should I say midway through 2009, the financial crisis has started to subside. Banks started hiring again. And eventually I got a job at HSBC. And one of the reasons I was actually able to continue in investment banking was that HSBC in London asked me if I wanted to move to HSBC in Hong Kong. and I jumped at the chance. So I was only meant to be in Hong Kong for about 3 to 4 months. And that's what they said to me. But after I got there and I realized, this was a different life. I was partying a lot. I was drinking a lot. There's a huge expat lifestyle out there in Hong Kong, where I was telling someone the other day, there are boat parties, champagne brunches, you can have custom-made suits,
wow.
and travel, lavish holidays. I mean, it's a really crazy lifestyle, and so I got sucked into that for the next 5 years. And that's the reason why I stayed in investment banking for, another period of time until I realized I needed to leave.
Absolutely. As you said, it really becomes part of your entire life and identity, your friends and the things you do at work, the things you do outside of work. It's hard to leave that behind. So then at what point did you decide, I really can't do this anymore?
Well, as I said, I was a dreadful employee. So typically what I would do is HSBC allowed us to listen to YouTube. I actually watch YouTube. It wasn't banned. So I would be at work and I would be listening to YouTube. So I'd be listening to music on YouTube instead of working. And that was my typical day. And people would call me. So for instance, I would just put in one earphone and I'd be listening to music. I'd be listening to podcasts. I'd be listening to audiobooks, particularly Les Brown. So I like to credit him with actually getting me to quit. So I would be listening to YouTube instead of doing any work. And so my phone would ring and people would say to me, "Oh, Femi, I really need this document. When can you get this out to me?" And I would say, "Well, I'm really busy at the moment, but if you give me some further information, then let me look into it."
Yeah.
And so I would speak to them for 5 minutes, and then they would say, and then I would say, "Listen, as I said, I'm really busy at the moment, but I'm going to prioritize your work." And then that would make them feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, "Look, I'll get back to you in the next few days." And then it would make them feel better. And then I would hang up the phone and I would go back to whatever I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was typically what I was doing, but I didn't feel fulfilled at all.
Right.
I mean, it was very bad. And as I said, I was doing a lot of drinking and partying and all that. And I just got to a point where I got sick of the entire thing. So on the 7th of June, 2014, I did what's called the Landmark course, which is a self-development course, which runs, it's around about 3 to 4 days. And one of the things they make you do before you start the course is to write down what you want to gain from the course. So essentially what you want out of life. And one of the things that I wrote down was that I wanted to quit my job in the corporate world in investment banking, but I just really didn't have the courage to do it. And a friend of mine who did the course with me, I met him 3 weeks later and he said, "Femi, I quit my job." And that gave me the impetus. I walked into work the next day and I handed in my notice, and that was it.
Wow. So it literally was, I don't want to say it was a quick decision, but there were a lot of things building up to it. And then the actual moment of change sounded like it came very quickly.
Yeah. The moment of change came really quickly. But as I said, I made that decision 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So it didn't really come quickly. I just took the decision very, very quickly. And I partly want to credit Les Brown with that because it forced me to do something with my life. So to do something meaningful. As I mentioned previously, from 2014 to 2017, I started a bunch of businesses and all of them collapsed. And all of them were dreadful, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I wasted a lot of time and money on a lot of different business ideas. However, I learned a lot of different things along the way because I was involved in so many different businesses. And I mean, so many different businesses. I mean, anything and everything that you can think of, I tried to do it. So I got to understand a lot of different businesses, and I got to understand how to deal with people in these different businesses. It's been very difficult, but it's also been a blessing at the same time.
That's great. You've mentioned Les Brown a couple times. I'm not familiar with his work. Could you tell me a little bit about him?
So Les Brown is he's one of the world's top motivational speakers. So he is, he's about 80 now.
Oh.
So he was really pre-internet days. He actually had a show on PBS in the US So he's American.
Mm-hmm.
Background is that he was born to a single mother on the floor in an abandoned building in Liberty City in Miami. When he was about 18 months old, he got adopted. He was always told that he was dumb. He didn't go to college, but he said that he met someone who instilled belief into him. And using that belief, he actually became one of the top rated speakers in the world. And I mean, if you Google him, you will see that he's done, huge conventions where he's speaking to maybe up to 80,000 people. But I mean, he's got a real hunger and a passion that really fires you up. And I'd liken him to a Pentecostal pastor. In the way he's able to rile the crowd and get people to take actions. And so he got me to take the action. However, there was no plan for me after that. However, I would still say that I wouldn't suggest that everyone does what I did. Mm-hmm. However, you don't need to be great to get started, but you need to start to be great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's taking that first step. That's what it's all about. You can do all the thinking you want to, but it really is about action in the end. That's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, he really did get me to take action, because I just knew that I just couldn't continue that way. I mean, I started a blog around that time, and my friends used to complain that my blog was so depressing. And I would go back and I'd read some of the blogs that I put out, but I authentically wanted to be myself in these blogs, and it was really, really depressing stuff. Yeah. And I wanted to get out of that cycle. I wasn't depressed to the point of being suicidal like I was in 2009, but I really, really was in a bad space at that point. And I just believe that all the money in the world is not worth it. I was speaking to a friend yesterday, and he was telling me about some people that he knows, and they have a lot of money. However, they're not happy. And I think we see that cycle over and over again. So it's really not about the money.
Absolutely. So then you did take action. And when you left your job, was that in 2014?
Yes. So one thing I didn't mention is that I had a 3-month notice period. So I quit in June 2014, and then I left HSBC in September 2014. Now, I figured that in the 3-month period, I would have got my stuff together, and I would have come up with some novel business idea, and I would have raised, between 500,000 and 5 million US dollars. And my business would be hunky dory. However, that did not happen at all. In fact, I was involved in 2 network marketing companies at the time, and I also started broking commodities deals. That I fell into. Those are the things that I started doing first of all, and both of those collapsed in dramatic fashion. I wasted a lot of time on those businesses, but as I said, I mean, it taught me a lot about the business that I started today.
Wow. Yeah. I know you had mentioned to me earlier that you were part of a couple of different network marketing organizations. And I think in the States, sometimes they're called multi-level marketing.
That's right.
We have different kinds of terms for them, just for anyone listening who may not be familiar with that term. What was the turning point that got you to set aside the network marketing and move in a different direction?
Well, one of the with the network marketing, and I mean, this was a huge thing for me with the multi-level marketing. I got involved with these local Chinese people because I was in Hong Kong at the time, and I became very good friends with them. In fact, one of them came out to London with me. I invited him here because I was coming here on vacation to see my parents. And I spent a lot of time with those guys, getting to understand their business. And then I invited a lot of my friends into that business as well. But after about 6 months, we realized that it was actually fraudulent. Wow. And the reason they started it was they either realized it at some point, but they didn't care, or they started it initially because they wanted to, because it was fraud. But in any case, my friends lost a lot of money in that deal. And that was a huge blow to me. That was a really, really huge blow to me. because or the reason someone is called a con man is because they give you confidence in what they're doing. So they brought me in to give my friends confidence in these deals. And that's what I did. And ultimately, they lost a lot of money. And I mean, even today, just talking about it, just thinking about it, I mean, it really does. I'm really upset about it because, you know, these people are my friends. I brought them in, and you know, the whole thing went belly up. So I still feel responsible for that.
Wow. Yeah, that's a difficult lesson to learn as you're trying to find out, you know, what you want to do and what your real passions are. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, because of that, and because of a bunch of other things, when I started this business, I didn't this LinkedIn business. About 18 months ago, I decided I wasn't going to have any business partners, and also that I didn't want to raise any capital, and I didn't want to get my friends involved. Certainly not immediately. And also I didn't want to be involved in someone else's business because I really wanted to ensure that would never, ever happen again. And so I'm very, very careful these days when I bring people together because I don't want the same thing to happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess in the timeline of your story, this brings us to about 2017, so last year. Is that when you decided to start your own business around LinkedIn optimization?
Yes, so a lot of the businesses I was involved in between 2014 and 2017 were other people's businesses. So I mentioned referral marketing, I mentioned broking commodities deals. I was also working on raising capital for other people's businesses. But they were always someone else's businesses. And there's always a difficulty in that because they may suddenly decide that they're going to change their mind. They may decide that the business has collapsed and they're no longer interested. It could be fraudulent. I mean, there are just so many things that bring a lot of issues when you're dealing with someone else's business. And so I decided, okay, I wanted a business that was purely my own. And that is how I came up with linked optimization. But there are certain criteria that I wanted to fulfill. So as I said before, I didn't want to raise any capital for this business. I didn't want any business partners, at least not immediately. I wanted a business that I could scale over time. I wanted a business that I could take with me wherever I go. So an online business. And I also wanted something that was very simple. And that's how I came up with the idea of this linked optimization.
Yeah. So for those of us who may not be as familiar with digital marketing and optimization on social media, can you tell us a little bit about what you do in your business for your clients?
Sure. So first of all, LinkedIn is, out of all of the, I dread to say, social networks, LinkedIn is the one that is really a pure B2B, or at least it's the number one B2B social network. All of the other social networks, so Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, most of those are actually B2C businesses. But LinkedIn is number one for marketers when it comes to generating B2B leads. Now, LinkedIn has 600 million profiles or 600 million users, and that's growing rapidly. They've been around for a long time, over 10 years now. And anyone who is anyone has some kind of presence on LinkedIn. So, I mean, think of any major professionals in the Western world, they have some kind of presence on LinkedIn. Every single company that you could think of, certainly in the Western world, will have some kind of presence on LinkedIn. If someone's to Google your name, for example, your LinkedIn profile would likely come top of those search results in Google. So it's very important that you control that information and what you want people to know about you, your personal brand effectively, but also your company's brand as well. So, I mean, it's very important. Even if you decide that you don't want to use my service, it's still very important that you get your LinkedIn profile in check for those reasons. But what I do is we provide a fully outsourced LinkedIn lead generation service, and we work predominantly with sales professionals and the businesses to generate B2B leads on LinkedIn. And typically my clients get 10 to 15 additional high-ticket sales appointments every month. And all they have to do is focus on closing them. Yeah. So I start off by optimizing their LinkedIn profile. And then from there, we start to implement strategies to grow their business, to generate them leads so that they can increase their revenue using LinkedIn. So for instance, joining relevant groups on LinkedIn. So you can join a maximum of 100 groups on LinkedIn and then posting content into that group and then start engaging with them. And the good thing about groups is that people join groups because they have a particular interest in that subject. Also using the premium account features, the advanced lead search functionality of those to target key prospects. And again, using groups because this is always an indicator of people's interests in business. Then also engaging with the clients using LinkedIn's messaging function. So that's a one-to-one strategy where you can speak to people directly and have a business conversation. I wouldn't say start off selling straight away, but you want to have some kind of conversation, build rapport. And then if it works, take it offline, have a phone call, or have a direct meeting, so face-to-face. Then also, we want to promote their content on LinkedIn. So both within groups and then in the regular feed as well. So to promote the brand and the authority status of the owner of the company. Then the next thing we do is potentially to increase the company page followers using paid LinkedIn strategies. And then also creating lists of saved leads in Sales Navigator so that we can monitor top prospects, because Sales Navigator allows you to monitor company news and the activity of your top prospects. So there's a bunch of different strategies that we could use, but those are just a flavor of some of the strategies that I advise my clients on.
Wow. I think most every business kind of knows that they should be on LinkedIn, but I'd imagine that a lot of people really don't have any idea how to really unlock the value and the power of LinkedIn. So that's a really great set of services that you're providing.
Yeah. And also, actually, I would say that for someone who is searching for a job, I guarantee you that the HR manager of that company or a recruitment consultant, once they receive your CV, they're probably going to Google your name and your LinkedIn profile will come up top of those search results. If they don't Google your name, they're going to put your name into LinkedIn's search functionality, and then they're going to use the information that they find on there to make a decision to hire you. Everyone should be aware of what they're putting on LinkedIn because, we live in this digital age where there's so much information out there. And I know that certainly a lot of people have put a lot of personal information on Facebook and that comes back to haunt them.
Yeah.
And we've read stories time and time and time again about people saying that they're sick, but yet they're out partying and they put that information on Facebook and then it comes back to haunt them.
Yeah.
So it's very important what you put out there. But I also want to add, because I forgot to mention this, the tasks that we perform on LinkedIn, they're not particularly complicated. Anyone can learn these tasks over time. If they put in about 100 hours, they could probably learn what they need to do on LinkedIn. And that's just reading lots of different information, taking a few courses on LinkedIn. But to be effective, to implement an effective lead generation or marketing strategy on LinkedIn, it needs to be an ongoing process, so a daily process. And this is what we do. So effectively, what we do for our clients is we save them time. So rather than them focusing on LinkedIn and trying to gain expertise in LinkedIn, they can focus on their business and we focus on using LinkedIn to grow their business.
That's great. Long term, what goals do you have for your business?
Long term, I intend to expand into other things. And these are things that I've started to work on. So someone approached me the other day to start it's like a LinkedIn local. Essentially what it is, it's a networking event for professionals in the city of London. And so the person approached me and said, look, would you like to co-host this event? Because she's in the hospitality industry. She's hosted events before. And then we can add a LinkedIn element to it. Maybe where I come there and I give some tips and some advice. I said, sure, because it's right on point with the branding of my business and the marketing of my business. Other people have come to me with other offers and I've actually turned them down because it really wasn't on point with my brand. So networking events. Other things that I'll be doing in the next 3 to 6 months will be LinkedIn online courses, more consulting, more corporate training. And that's a flavor of the direction that my business is going to go into.
Wow, that's great. So how can people get in touch with you to learn more about you or your business?
Sure, I would say that you could, well, as I said, Google my name and my LinkedIn profile will come up. And the LinkedIn profile is probably the best way to get in touch with me. And I say that because I have my phone number on there, and that's my direct phone number. I have my email address on there. And really, if you go to my, if you were to go to my LinkedIn profile, this is the summary section of it. So, I mean, it's at the top of my summary section. So my direct phone number, my direct email address, my website, which is linkedoptimization.com, my Calendly, so you can directly book a meeting with me in my calendar so we can get on a Zoom call or a Skype call and talk in more detail.
Fantastic. And I will put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes of the podcast so that people can access all of that great information.
And that would be much appreciated.
Wonderful. As we close out the podcast today, is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to know, like any advice, words of wisdom, or anything that they can help or support you with?
Sure. I mean, I hopefully this is words of wisdom, but what I would say is that a lot of us live our lives based upon our friends, based upon our family, based upon what society deems we should be doing. And that's the mistake that I made very early on in my life, which led to the crisis that I faced in 2009. What I would say, and this is an exercise that I did, is that I wrote a list on a Word document because it needs to change over time. I wrote a list of all of the things that I want from life. And the reason I wrote it was because I authentically wanted to know what was important to me. But what I decided to do was never, ever, ever show that list to anyone. Because I knew if I did show it to someone, there was a possibility that I would be lying to myself or lying to them, because I wanted to save face. So start by writing down a list of all of the things that you want from life, not anyone else. And then the second thing I would suggest you do is start to implement them. You can start with the simplest thing first of all, and that may be to reduce your portions because you want to get into great shape. So you can start reducing your portions or go for a 10-minute walk on a daily basis. So breaking that down. And then the third thing I would say is tenacity. Stick to it and work on it. These goals, they're not supposed to be simple goals. They're supposed to be things that we can't fathom having at the moment. But I believe that we can have whatever we want in life. And I believe that everyone can have whatever they want from life. And just work on it over time. And I guarantee you that over time, you will get better at this. And the example I always like to use is T. Harv Eker, who is also a famous speaker. When he became an entrepreneur, it took him 12 years and 14 different jobs or 14 different business ideas for him to become successful. Now, most people would never wait 12 years to be successful at anything they want to do. I mean, I certainly know that if I had to wait 12 years, I think I would have given up a long time ago. Yeah. But I actually respect his tenacity. I mean, but he said there were periods during that time. I mean, he had to move back in with his parents and live in the basement. He said at one point he was so ashamed with himself that he covered up all of the mirrors in his house. Wow. Because he was too disgusted to look at himself. But I would say that it's important that we have that tenacity to just keep on going, to keep on going, to keep on going. And then he said that eventually he sold his business and he became a millionaire after having his business for 2 years. And now, I mean, he's a multi-millionaire. But I would say that we just need to be tenacious and keep working towards our goals, but make sure that they're authentically our goals, not someone else's.
Those are great words of wisdom. Well, thank you, Femi. I really appreciate you being on the podcast and being so open and honest about your story towards entrepreneurship and really just helping to remind all of us that it's not always a clean story, a straight line. You don't just sort of jump and find your passion immediately, that it really is a journey of learning about yourself and trying different things and sometimes failing and getting up and trying the next thing until you really find what works. And I thank you for sharing your story with us. I think it will inspire a lot of people.
Thank you very much. Quick word on failure. I have failed over and over and over and over again. And I've actually gotten used to it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's something that we're often not comfortable with, but it is important to be able to fail and learn from our failures in order to really wind up where we're supposed to be.
Because I mean, I would say if you're not failing, then you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough.
That's true. Great to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Beyond 6 Seconds. Please help us spread the word about this podcast. Share it with a friend, give us a shout out on your social media, or write a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player. You can find all of our episodes on our website, www.beyond6seconds.com. Until next time.